of trying to get a formal government established, and it is obviously essential that this be done in the context of the investment that I know you're so keen to see the country be able to secure, and which I think is the main purpose, or one of the main purposes, of your visit here to London. Of course, Lebanon, just to state at the beginning, is a microcosm, I think, today of the geopolitical as well as sectarian conflicts affecting the whole of the Middle East and North Africa, and obviously therefore contains many of the difficulties. I would say as well, Lebanon, I think, and you see it from this room here, has always been an emblem of the entrepreneurialism, the positivism and the hope that we have for the future of the region as well, and for resilience. And from that point of view in particular, we'd like to thank you much for coming to Chatham House, for sharing your thoughts with us. We'll have some remarks. There'll be plenty of time for discussion with you for some Q&A. But Saad Hariri, welcome back to Chatham House. Great to have you with us. Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm honored and humbled to have the opportunity to address this distinguished audience, which I am also sure will be a tough audience. I thank Chatham House and Dr. Robert Niblett for having me. I am here during very complicated times, both for my country and the region. As you may already know, we held elections in May, the first in 9 years. President Aoun and I agreed to steer the country towards economic and political stability through reforms, capital investments, and strengthening our security institution in the respect of our constitution and our democracy. Since May, I have spared no effort to form a national unity government. I entered consultation in good faith to ensure fair representation in the Council of Ministers. I'm a patient man, and I'm willing to wait and find a solution, which some don't like. But this is not about me. It is about Lebanon. Our country cannot afford to continue without a government that can protect Lebanon from regional turmoil and economic downfall. I'm confident that we will reach a government soon, as all realize that the need for stability and economic growth far outweighs any political agenda. Lebanon remains an oasis of peace and stability. We have tested civil war long before all other countries in the region and learned many lessons. I, for one, am adamant never to allow the return of divisions and strife. And even though our power-sharing agreement might be complicated, we have to always remember it is the sort of agreement most countries in the region are aspiring to attain today. Now, for the really difficult part. Lebanon is in a really, really rough neighborhood. Extremely rough. We have to work very hard to prevent the fires from neighboring Syria to spread to our country, and to avoid the belligerent escalation in the Netanyahu government seems to be embarked on. This dual task is complicated by the presence of 1.5 million displaced Syrians, 200,000 Palestinian refugees, and the accusation made by Israel recently. To begin with displaced and refugee population, and to give you an order of magnitude, it is as if the United Kingdom has had 33 million refugees on its territory today. In Lebanon today, we have 4 million Lebanese and about 2 million refugees. This has placed incredible pressure on our infrastructure, basic services, and fiscal situation. We are receiving humanitarian assistance, which is welcome but still insufficient. And we are working hard to mobilize the international community to do its part, considering Lebanon is providing a public good to the world. Our army and security services are on constant alert to prevent any terrorist infiltration, and our national consensus stands strong in the face of extremism. We face Israeli escalation by committing to international law and resolution. Most importantly, United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701. We consider the Lebanese army as the sole defender of sovereignty, and we are engaged in a national dialogue process to agree on a national defense strategy, which will resume as soon as the government is formed. In the many inter-Arab conflicts, my incumbent government has taken the decision that Lebanon, including all political formation in government, will abide by a policy of disassociation. This policy will be maintained in the new government. The region also faces a historic source of instability in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Our position is that of Arab consensus as expressed by the League of Arab States and by the Arab Peace Initiative in 2002. Basically, we see no other solution than two separate states, the capital of the Palestinian state in Jerusalem and the right of return guaranteed to the Palestinian diaspora. This last point is of particular importance to us, since our constitution forbids the permanent implantation of refugees, and our national consensus in the region as a model is rampart in the face of creative disruptive technology and transition. My incumbent government started 2 years ago. Government will continue on this path, and I am sure the legendary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Thank you for those remarks and for setting out some of the challenges your country currently faces. I want in particular to take the opportunity maybe just to start, if I may say, at the simple side of this on the economy. Not least because I think part of the reason you're here is to try to drum up some of the much needed investment in the country, in particular in infrastructure. A word or two about this. Important is to have a fully government in order to be able to both attract the investment and to be able to undertake some of the reforms in that space. Could you just say a word or two about that economic challenge?
Yeah, okay. What we did is, you know, we have a particular circumstances with 1.5 million refugees. And we have had 1% of growth in Lebanon since, I think, 2014, 2015. And it's been, you know, very staggering on this issue. The way to, you know, have quick growth and deal with unemployment of Lebanese youth, and also you have a 75% unemployment among the refugees, we had to look for, you know, outside the box. And we looked at where we could, you know, invest money and create jobs quickly and move the economy, increase the growth, grow our economy. That will affect the debt to GDP in our economy. This has a very good effect on our, you know, on our general economy. Just also to let you know that historically Lebanon always has used Syrian manpower for all the infrastructure work that we've had in the past. In the early 90s, for instance, we've had 600 to 800,000 Syrians working in Lebanon on agriculture and infrastructure jobs. So our idea is how to stabilize socially, you know, the country, especially with the presence of the 1.5 million Syrians, and also make sure that our youth and our Lebanese people have enough jobs in the Saad conference. So we went to Saad, we represented 250 projects, we wanted to do reforms, so we brought in the World Bank, we brought in the IMF, we sat all together, saw each project by itself, and took the advice of the IMF how to fix our fiscal problems. And we agreed, all of us in the government, in the incumbent government, that before going to Saad, we agreed on all the reforms, we agreed on all the projects, and alhamdulillah, we went to Saad and we got the money that we asked for. So now, since the elections, we have been working. Yes, we had the elections, but work didn't stop. For instance, because we thought that certain reforms need to be passed straight away after Saad. Even with the caretaker government, we went to the parliament, we have about 14 laws of reforms. In the in Saad, we passed about 5 of them, even though we had a caretaker government, and the new parliament passed them. We had an agreement also with the Speaker of the House and Parliament that any law that has to do, or reform that has to do with Saad, needs to go on a fast track. Usually, just to give you an instance, because of the bureaucracy we have in Lebanon, a reform law or a loan that we get from World Bank usually used to take a year or 2. Today, it takes 3 to 4 weeks. So there is a fast track method that we're working in the government, because everybody realizes in Lebanon that we cannot sustain our economy, we cannot sustain the 1.5 million refugees in Lebanon if we do not create jobs for us, for the Lebanese. And Lebanon has to change. We cannot work like we used to work 10 years ago or 15 years ago or 20 years ago. Yesterday, in the Joint Parliamentary Committee, we finally agreed on changing our commercial law that was done in 1958, I think. So imagine, after how many years? 6 years? So we finally changed our commercial law.
And so on these adjustments you were just talking about, part of the idea, I presume, had been, or hoped had been, that as the conflict in Syria wound down in some shape or other, that would provide an opportunity either for refugees to go back, or opportunities also for Lebanese companies to be able to be involved in reconstruction. Now, to state the obvious, we seem to be in an impasse in that conflict, with outside powers saying they're not going to provide that support or not legitimize it, not lift sanctions without some type of a political solution being developed for Syria. How important is resolving Syria for your economic hope in Lebanon?
I mean, Syria represents a path for us also to Iraq, to Jordan, to the Gulf. That's, one of the issues that is extremely important. But also, the 1.5 million for us, in being in Lebanon, weighs very heavy on our economy, it weighs heavy on our environment, our social fabrics, so it weighs extremely heavy. Our strategy has been, we invest in infrastructure, prepare Lebanon as a platform. So eventually, if big companies from Britain or the United or the European Union would like to come and invest in Lebanon, or make Lebanon as a hub for them to go to do the reconstruction in Syria, in Iraq, even in Libya, because Lebanon is a multicultural country, and we want to make it, we're shooting for how to make business, go easier in Lebanon. So I want to make Lebanon as a service, service hub for a lot of the international companies to come to Lebanon. We want to make sure that the platform of everything that they need, from internet or energy and anything they want, should be in Lebanon. This is what we're trying to work out. And Syria represents a big market, as is Iraq, Iraq represents for Lebanon a big market, and we already have a lot of business between Lebanon and Iraq, and we want to make sure that this grows.
Of course, Iraq, another country that's struggling at the moment also to be able to get its government in place. I do want to open up in a minute to questions, so those of you can have your questions ready, but let me just give you a chance to address one more issue at the moment, which is internal, but the extent to which at the moment, from your perspective, obviously sadly in the last legislative elections, your party took a little bit of a hit, and it appears to certainly have given an element of confidence to Hezbollah to want to be more adamant in designing what a future formal government would look like. What's your sense of, well, A, how likely is it that we will get to, or you will get to, a government that moves beyond the caretaker arrangement, even though it seems to be doing a lot of stuff? How likely is that to happen? And what kind of compromises do you think might be needed for that to be achieved? I
think after Chatham House, discussion, we will be forming the government very soon. Especially if I don't slip in any question.
Well, yes, we don't want to make it more difficult for you to achieve any of those.
I think the government is extremely important, but I've set myself in a way where for me, the focus is how to make Saad functional.
Right.
Either we have a government, and this is something that will be a big plus for us, but at the same time, today I came to London and met with so many officials and so many financial institutions and so many businesses. Yeah. And, business can be, we can do business in Lebanon even with the caretaker government. And we also have some agreements with the parliament that we can pass laws. But the ideal thing yes, it would be forming the government. I think we're at the last 100 meters of forming the government. Hopefully, we should form it before the end of the year.
Good. I won't ask how many meters there were before the 100, but we will see. Right, let me draw a few questions in. I'm going to take them, I think, originally one at a time, and we'll see how we go in time. Then I'll group a few of them as well. And, yeah, first, please, there's a hand there. Oh, yeah, please. Yeah, Saad. Yeah. And then I'll come over to this side. Yeah.
Thank you.
Keep going.
Sausan Asfari, the Asfari Foundation. I understand Lebanon is challenged on the foreign policy front, and we're not always able to make our own decisions. But on the domestic front, who is responsible for the mountains of garbage that are poisoning our air and land, for the cut in electricity, for the sewage seeping into our water and land? I mean, there must be some way of tackling the corruption, and who is responsible for fixing it?
Look, the problem, what happened in Lebanon, maybe if we can take 2 minutes on this. No. After the assassination of my father, the country went into a huge division. People were not listening to each other, not talking to each other. We were actually talking at each other. We were not listening to each other until I decided in 2016 to make 2 initiatives to break this, this division we have in the country, where I went and nominated a candidate for presidency from the other side of what we believe that should be a president. And I think that in the first initiative we failed. On the second initiative with President Aoun, we succeeded. And this had mixed the cards politically. But what did the division do to Lebanon? Nothing. The problem is, if you want to blame somebody, you should blame all of us, because we were politically totally against each other. Anybody that presented a project from the right, the left would refuse it, and anybody that would present a project or a law on the left, we all used to work on how to make sure the others fail. And I think the right mix is we elected President Aoun. We decided, all of us, to put the differences on the side, especially the regional issues, because, Hezbollah is not going to change my mind on Iran, and I'm not going to change his mind on Saudi Arabia or the Gulf or what we believe in, or our alliance with Great Britain or the United States and all these countries. And I'm not going to change my mind about his way in dealing in the region. So we decided to put our differences, regional differences, aside, and we decided to focus on what is good for the country in the past year and a half. That's why we were able to do a budgets that we didn't do for 12 years. That's why we were able to agree together on an election law, knowing that, when I agreed on the election law, actually most governments, when they do election laws, they do their election laws on assuming some results that will come out good for them. What I signed for is knowing that I'm going to lose in these elections, just for the sake of wanting the country to move forward. My policy has been always, if we stand still, we're not going to advance. We need to compromise. So definitely what happened in the garbage, what happened in the electricity, what happened in all of that is due to all our mistakes, all of us together. And now we have passed a plan for energy. We have passed a plan for the waste and solid waste. We've passed a plan for a strategy for telecommunication. We should have spent, for instance, on fiber optics or the internet, investment of $600 to $700 million in the early 2010. But we didn't because of our division. We did it in 2017, and now it's rolled. The same thing in energy. Now we're working very closely with the World Bank, with the with the IFC, on helping us to develop all these plans. So hopefully once we form this government, you will see a lot of those issues being resolved because we have now a strategy on how to tackle these problems.
Let me, first gentleman here, then I'll go to you there. I'm coming back to the other side. Yeah.
Yes, good afternoon, Your Excellency. Dr. Kouri from Fiera Capital. I have two questions. First, Lebanon benefited from a robust banking system historically. The sector is larger than the one in Greece or in Argentina, for instance. Deposit inflows are estimated at $2.4 billion this year, compared to $7.3 billion last year. The slowdown in deposit inflows mean that now they fall short of external financing requirements. Funding shortfall is estimated at $2 billion in 2018. What measures would you consider introducing to increase depositors' confidence in the medium term, keeping in mind the increase in deposit rates and particularly the increase in dollarized deposits in the country? Second question, His Excellency, the Governor of Bank of Lebanon, supports the introduction of a Lebanese digital currency, which he plans to launch in 2019. To what extent do you believe the adoption of blockchain technology and of a Lebanese cryptocurrency can help address the reduction of liquidity in Lebanon? Thank you.
I think there are several, reasons why we have, decreased deposits in Lebanese banks. First of all, the Gulf states, the remittances that we used to get from the Gulf states has diminished because also the Gulf states are suffering from an economic situation. You have less Lebanese working there, you have less salaries that are being paid in the Gulf. We used to get remittances about 9 billion or 8 billion, I think, from from this region. It dropped down to, I think, 5 or something like this. So this is part of the reasons why we get less investment. Plus the other part is you have higher interest rate you have higher interest rate in the world. The United States has increased its interest rate up to, I think, 3.5 now. And this is not only Lebanon suffering from it, but you will see all the cash, the dollar in the region has diminished because of the increase in interest rate. What we are doing today to increase that part of pumping money into the country is opening up our private sector and our PPP law that we passed in 2017, and all the projects that we want to do, whether it's energy, whether it's telecom, whether it's waste management, solid waste, we want to renew, we want to expand our airport from 6 million to 15 million. This is going to be done by BOT. This is all money is gonna come into the country to build all these projects. Plus you have the 11.8 billion that was committed in CEDAR. These are on specific projects that are studied by the World Bank, and this is money that's going to come into the country. And also at the same time we're talking with several Arab states and not only Arab but also our friends in Europe, our friends in the United States, to see if we can do some deposits into the central bank to increase our dollars into Lebanon. This is something that we have just launched just a week ago, but all the things that I said before, this is the plan how to bring money into the country. The second question was it?
Reserve currency and with blockchain technology.
I'm going to let Riyad Salami answer that, eventually. I'm just going to sit and watch it.
It's the good thing about having sort of a government at times. Yes.
This is, I can't interfere in what he does. But
so gentleman first here, and then I'm going to the lady there, and I will get others in. Yep.
I'm Jafar Al-Ahmar, freelance journalist. Prime Minister, why it's taking you so a long time to form a government, and how are you going to implement your vision and policies if after 7 months since the elections you are still struggling to form a government?
I think we just came back from an election that took us 9 years to do, or 10. So for a 10-year election, 6 months and a half is, and I'm pretty sure that by the end of the year we'll have a government, inshallah. I think the challenges are very hard. Yes, there is a new set of people in the parliament. and we need to take that into consideration. Some people want more, some people want less. This is democracy in the end. Some people would want to take it, this is a regional issue, this is an XYZ, issue. But if you look at in some democracies like Belgium and other countries, sometimes also in Germany, it took some while to form a government in the beginning. So we're getting there. I think it's not a regional issue. I believe it's an internal issue. It's because the equation changed a little bit in Parliament, and some people want more. I believe that most of the obstacles were resolved. There's still one obstacle, and I'm sure that we are able to resolve it.
Are external funders helping or not helping, thinking, including the World Bank, etc., in terms of their demand or their need for moving beyond a caretaker government? Is it helpful to have pressure from the outside on this, or is it really irrelevant in a way? This is a case of having to resolve things internally entirely.
Look, there are no two people who differ on the need of forming a government. I think when the World Bank and other institutions pushes us and to form a government, I think this is for the benefit of Lebanon. And I think the pressure that we have from the economic crisis that we have in Lebanon is pushing more and more people to form the government. But most importantly is most people today really believe in the reforms that are in Saad, because everybody understands that we cannot do business as usual or as before. We need to change, and we need to change now.
Okay. Lady here. I'm coming to the gentleman here. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Bari Alamuddin. It's lovely to see you here, actually. And I'm going to make sure not to ask you anything to slip so that we have a new government, hopefully. Prime Minister, I want to ask you about Israel. I mean, Israel doesn't need a reason like the tunnel to attack Lebanon. Have you discussed this possibility with the government here, and what did they tell you? Thank you.
About the tunnels, you mean?
Yes, because Israel is threatening us. Thank you.
Well, I just want to tell, since we are in Chatham House, I mean, you open the news today and you see, some of the headlines, and you see that, Lebanon has tunnels that go through all the way to Israel. And there is some allegation that Hezbollah is doing those things. But have you ever heard about how many sorties Israel makes every month into Lebanon? Have you ever heard how many times Israel entered our international waters? Have you? Has anyone? Do you think this is fair? Do you think it's fair that 150 sorties were made last month into Lebanon? Do you think it's fair that our international waters are penetrated on 10, 20 times a month? And we have also occupied land, Shib'a farms. For me, as a government, the 1701 has to be implemented to the letter. We will not accept other than that. The tunnels, the Lebanese army will deal with this issue, full stop. But to come out blatantly and say that Lebanon is responsible for all of this, I think Israel has a lot to answer on how many intrusions it has made since 1701 has been approved. If you count the amount of complaints, and you see the amount of complaints that we have sent to the United Nations, it will be countless. But what has been done with it? Nothing.
If I can just comment on the back of that, though, Lebanon's in a, one might say, unique position where obviously you have your Lebanese army, but you also have a highly militarized, what do you want to call it? I don't know, militia or an army of one of the parties, whatever you want to call it. And so therefore, an outside government is going to look and work out, well, hold on, am I dealing with a state, or am I dealing with a state within a state? I mean, for the criticism you make of Israel, do you see where that viewpoint might come from as well?
Yes, I see that point of view, and I say, look, Israel has launched how many wars on Lebanon? 93, 96, 2000, they withdrew, and then 2006, and in between, some attacks or some assassinations from here and there. Did it weaken Hezbollah? Actually, in 2006, Israel was saying, or Hezbollah was saying, it had 10,000 missiles. And Israel was thought, at the time, it's like, look, to the world, Hezbollah has 10,000. Today, Hezbollah has, not by me, I don't know how much they have, but they say they have 100,000 missiles. What did the war in 2006 do to all of this? Did it make Lebanon weaker? Did it make Hezbollah weaker? If you want to resolve this issue, it's a regional issue. I always say to people, you know, this is a regional issue. This is not a Lebanese issue. This is an Iranian issue. And if we want to deal with this issue, let's sit down on a table, let's stop these wars, and let's talk about how we resolve these issues in the region. If we want to make peace with Israel, we have a resolution that came out from the Arab League. But Netanyahu doesn't want peace. You know, this is what I really believe. I think Netanyahu wants a little piece of Lebanon, little piece of Golan, little piece of Palestine, little piece of Jordan. I mean, everybody went to Oslo, then the Palestinians, and there was agreements between governments, and this was destroyed. The Arab League came out with a peace process. Nothing happened. We want peace. We don't want war. And I don't think anybody in the region wants war. And I, for one, who have suffered from civil war and wars on my country, yes, I agree on the Arab League. But what does Israel want? Do they know what they want?
It's time to bring a diplomatic question in. So I've got a diplomat here.
Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Prime Minister.
Microphone. It's right there in front of you.
Thank you. Salam alaikum, Mr. Prime Minister. Honor for me to listen to you. My name is Euripides, Safir Kuprus, High Commissioner of Cyprus. Fascinating, the tour de force. Is the Mediterranean energy issue? I'm wondering if you could care to address it a little bit. Do you see it as a game changer? Do you see it also helping you with investments? What is your feedback from possible companies that you've been dealing with in order to push the issue forward, which is a cardinal for all of us in the region individually, but collectively? Shukran.
You mean for the oil and gas?
Yeah, you mean for the gas discoveries, I presume, yeah, Lisa meant.
I think, yes, it is a game changer for countries like Lebanon and Cyprus and everyone in the region. I think we are countries who never had natural resources. We're, you know, getting into this today. It can help our people in Lebanon and in the region also to move from one level to another level. But at the same time, we have to be careful on the expectation that we have. I think we should learn from the Norwegian experience, where they thought, you know, in the beginning, where, you know, they have oil and gas and they jumped on investment and then they almost got the country bankrupt. And this is but what they said to us. Actually, what saved them is when the oil jumped from, I think, $5 to all the way to the $4, because of the crisis that happened in the 70s. But we need to be careful. We need to invest in the right places. I think Lebanon has opened its blocks. You have Total and Eni and Novatek who came to Lebanon. There is another round of blocks that are going to be put out for bids, and this is something that completely transparent in Lebanon. And I think today in this conference, for the first time, we talked to BP, and they're interested into coming to invest on those blocks. And you find more big companies also interested in investing, even American companies that would like to invest in these blocks.
Good, thank you. A lady there, please. I'm coming to people bit by bit, yeah.
Thank you. My name is Rita Issa. I'm a medical doctor. I very much enjoyed your speech last night at the Lebanese embassy, where you acknowledged and recognized the contribution that 54% of the Lebanese population, women, have in their communities. However, only 6 out of 128 Lebanese MPs are women. That's less than 5%. And I'm just wondering, how do you see starting to balance parliamentary gender in coming years?
You know, half of these women are in my block. Just tells you. And second of all, I'm just going to tell you something that's funny. You know, when we went to vote for the law, myself and the Speaker of the House, and, you know, I don't want to talk confessionally, but, you know, President Berri is, you know, the head of the parliament, who is the Shi'i, and I am the Sunni, no? And we are the only blocks that voted for a quota in parliament, whereas all the other blocks, Christian blocks, voted against women having a quota. So this time we're working very hard on pushing everybody to get a quota in parliament. But what we did in our government, just to tell you, that we put a rule that any appointment that's going to be done, whether it's in شو مؤسسات? Public institutions or any appointment that the government will do, it will have a quota of women of 30%, and so in some cases 20%, and some cases in 40%. People in Lebanon underestimate the acceptance of the citizens in voting for women. And I think this is a problem with the political parties, not with the people. Just to give you an instance, when I did Robert elections within my party, we had places in our party like in Akkar, in Dhanniya, which are, thought to be a little bit, tougher on these subjects. And what surprised me is when people voted, they filled the quota in these regions, and in Beirut we were not able to fill it, where I had to appoint the quota myself. So people are really open. We just need to push, the law and make people vote for women.
Okay, this gentleman been waiting patiently here first. Yep, right in the middle. I'm good. Yep.
Thank you, Prime Minister Hariri. Ahlan wa sahlan blendan. You mentioned Iraq several times today, and you mentioned Iraq a couple of times today, and I am aware that your foreign minister was in Baghdad and also in the Kurdish region, I think last week, the foreign minister of Lebanon.
Yeah.
So evidently you have identified some areas of cooperation. What are these areas of cooperation, and what is the volume of trade between Iraq and Lebanon?
We want to, we want to open up our markets to all our Arab friends. I think, and I mentioned Iraq because I'm half Iraqi also, so I think, Iraq is a big market. I think we can learn from each other a lot. We live almost the same situation or they pass through the same situation that we have. I think there is, in the past, we hadn't focused on economic growth between the two countries. We need to focus on these markets. We need to focus on Morocco. We need to focus on Egypt. We need to focus on all the countries. Lebanon needs to open its market, and we need to penetrate other countries' markets. So it's what brings benefit to Lebanon and what brings benefit to Iraq.
Okay, lady waiting against the wall. You were there first, please, madam. Yeah. Microphone
Brindley
coming.
Bruton from NBC News. My first two-part question. You mentioned Netanyahu. Sorry. You mentioned Netanyahu several times, and he said he threatened something bad would happen. How would you react if that bad thing were to happen? And my second question is, how has your relationship with Saudi Arabia evolved in the last 3 months or so?
When we get to the Saudi question.
I thought it would be the first question.
It's been waiting politely on my list, but I thought I'd rather have it come from the floor to start with if we can.
I'll drink a sip of water for that.
Very openly asked, though. We might dig in a little more, but go on.
Look, I think, like you said, if something bad happens, we have to react with the bad thing. I mean, I wish he was promising something good, it's going to happen, instead of something bad. Maybe he should have said, let's go to peace with Palestinians and solve the problem instead of going to war. I think this is, the good thing. But if Israel decides to go to war to Lebanon, I'll tell you one thing, that it didn't do the job in they will not succeed. The only way to move forward in this region is by dialogue and peace. And I think, in the past, there was a man who wanted peace in Israel. It was Rabin, and he was killed. But Netanyahu doesn't want peace. He talks about it, but, he promises bad things that could happen to Lebanon. That's on one issue. On the relationship with Saudi Arabia, I was in Saudi Arabia, I think, a month and a half ago. And for the conference, in the midst of what was happening with the issue of Khashoggi, which I condemn, and the Saudi government condemns, and the whole world condemns, and everybody, the Saudi government has also arrested those people, and they have done what they should have done. From day one, I think this whole matter was maybe handled poorly, but I think now it's taking its course through justice. And my relationship with Saudi Arabia is a good relationship, and I believe that the Saudi market is a good market for Lebanon, and we need to, we've prepared many agreements that we will be signing with Saudi Arabia as soon as we form the government. And as soon as we form the government, you will see Saudi Arabia taking some serious steps towards Lebanon, helping Lebanon economically. In the Saad conference, Saudi Arabia committed $1 billion from its Saudi Development Bank. So I think, the relationship couldn't be better.
And just to follow up on that question a little bit, I mean, do you think that since the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, do you think there's been a change in the regional dynamic at all? Obviously, the United States, it would seem from the outside, is applying a bit more pressure for some change in the foreign policy of Saudi Arabia. They're also bringing pressure to bear on Iran, obviously, at the same time. But do you sense that there's a changed dynamic regionally at all since, in really the last 3 to 4 months, both since that event, since the reimposition of sanctions on Iran by the US, the JCPOA sanctions that were lifted? As you see, because you're at the front line and you sense those vibrations that change in the region, and you yourself who travel around, you sense them very closely. So to what extent do you think, there is a change? Do you sense a change in the environment?
I think, the United States withdrawing from the JCPOA is, an American decision. And the sanctions, you can feel them in the region very bluntly. I mean, Iran is suffering economically. You can see that some exports that we used to get from Iran are stopping these days. You can see that Iran has a big challenge to face. But at the same time also, we hear today new talk about Yemen and ending the war in Yemen, and this is something good for the region. I think, like I told you, I believe in dialogue and I believe in peace. And I think the way to move forward is by dialogue and peace. But at the same time, you will have to have two people are willing to sit on the table and talk. You cannot be doing something and then you say you want to go to have a dialogue about peace. I think, there is very high tension. My concern today is any mistake made on the Hormuz, Strait is detrimental for the region. The tensions are high among all these powers. Lebanon is a very small country, but at the same time, this small country was able to make a little miracle after the 7-year war, and we were able to push back any tension that came from Syria. And surprisingly, other than the Hezbollah fighters that fought from, with the Syrian regime, the numbers of extremists that came out from Lebanon compared to other Arab nations or compared to Europe even is very minimal. It's about 150 maybe in the past 7-8 years. So this is something that we are proud of because we worked very hard with our youth to make sure that this is not something that people or the youth will go to and fight because they see the extreme atrocities that happened or the regime did with its people in Syria.
As we're getting close to the end, I'm going to take 2 questions here first, and then I'm going to take a couple there. So, yeah, Joyce first. You had, Joyce, because you had your hand up first. So you had yours up later. I'll get to you. And there.
Joyce Hackney from Chatham House. What is your message for the millions of Lebanese who left the country looking for a better future, but have now no hopes and can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, given the economical, political, internal challenges? What's your message for them, Prime Minister?
And could you just hold that thought for a second? The lady's been waiting very patiently against the wall there. Yeah, and then I'm going to come to the 2 gentlemen here, you, sir, and Nick. Yeah.
Rima Mumtaz with ABC News. Prime Minister, you always seem to be between a rock and a hard place. You're always walking a very tight line. You seem to always have to be compromising, always trying to be the moderate force in the country. Are you condemned for the rest of your time as our Prime Minister to be in this position? And is your constituency condemned to being in this position while others in the country seem to be much less willing to compromise?
I'll start with the answer to you, and then we'll go back. I think, you know, two wrongs don't make a right. You know, if somebody is extremist in their position, it's not right for me to be extremist in my position. I think what we need to look is what benefits the country. My political ambitions are there, but I think my political ambitions without a growing country, without finding jobs to the youth, is not going to be, for me at least, it's not a position that I want to be in. I believe saying the truth on how to deal with issues is the only way to move forward. My father was like this. If you compare how my father, I mean, my father had it very hard, because today, yes, we're among Lebanese quarreling about formation of government, but my father had an occupying power who was telling him what he can do. Today, you know, my father couldn't appoint one person in any position in any ministry. Today, it's not like this. We have come a long way. We need to understand that we gained our freedom after the Syrian left Lebanon. And this has been a learning process for us as Lebanese, because this is the only time we Lebanese, after the civil war, after the Syrian regime left Lebanon, it is the only time that we're really running our country. And I tell you, we didn't do a good job in 2005 till 2016. Actually, we did exactly the opposite of what should have been done. We should have sat down and talked to each other, regardless of our differences. But at the time, you know, I used to come from a business community where I didn't know anything about politics. And sometimes I feel, you know, I should have, you know, done something at the time. But now I think we know what we're doing. We know how to move forward. We have a plan. And no, I'm not going to compromise all the time. I will compromise for the sake of the country. But, you know, things like this, what's prolonging to form this government, is because, no, I don't feel this, what was asked of me, is good for the country. It's actually bad for the country. And now we're trying to resolve this issue. On the message for the Lebanese, look, Lebanon is pretty divided inside Lebanon, you know, politically. And my call for the diaspora is forget who is in power. Forget who is Saad Hariri, forget who is the president, forget who is the speaker. The diaspora is the real power for Lebanon. If they want to be united, if they want to help Lebanon, they all should help Lebanon, regardless if Saad Hariri or XYZ is the prime minister. We should focus on how we could help. And I think we should learn from others. You know, other nations, they focus on how they could help their country, regardless of who is in politics. And to give you a small example that happened with me, in 1998, my father was in a political maneuver, was kicked out of power. So Salim al-Hus, Prime Minister Salim al-Hus, was going to Saudi Arabia. And at the time I was, I think, how old was I? 28, 27. My natural reaction, I said, oh, he's coming to Saudi Arabia. I need to make sure that he has a bad visit in Saudi Arabia, because he was against my father. When I went to tell my father this, you know, I said, you know, I have news, this guy is coming to Saudi Arabia, he said, and I'm looking how to undermine the visit. He said, no, no, no. You should work for it to make it successful. We should all help Salim al-Hus to be a good prime minister. And this is what we all need to do in the diaspora outside. Instead of looking to the Awnis, to the Mustaqbal, to Amal, to all of this, we should all work what is beneficial for Lebanon. And that's my call for the diaspora. And I think Lebanon today is doing the right thing. We have a plan. Saad is there. Reforms are there. And we will implement all of them. And if we don't implement, punish us with your voting. Vote for somebody else. If we don't do a good job, make your vote count.
Now, we're very close to the end. We're very close to the end, and yet I have numerous people who I won't get. We can extend a little bit. Well, I suspect that what I do here will still mean we'll extend a little bit. I'm going to take the last four Okay, and I'll keep track as well of them. Then you can answer them at the pace that you will. Gentleman's been waiting very patiently here, front row. Yeah.
My name Tariq Abu Samra. Sorry, I have a sore throat. From London citizens and from Jdedet Marjayoun in Lebanon, and a member of Chatham House since ages. The first question to the Prime Minister. One question.
One really good question.
It is a good. It is one first question and last with A and B.
This is why Lebanon's so successful.
After the, I will be very, very quick. I am always quick. After the harmonious meeting at the Presidential Palace on Monday between the Prime Minister, Speaker, and the President, and after, and most importantly, the impressive speech of Prime Minister today, do you believe that we are going to have immediately and sure a government? And are we going to have any clashes in the south? And are we going to sort the problem between us and Syria? And last word to you, Chairman, to you, Lebanon is a lucrative, solid country and investments still going. And on the 20th of December, under the patronage of Prime Minister Saad Hariri, he will open one of the biggest hotels in town of Beirut. God save Lebanon and the Queen.
Thank you. If you pass the microphone back a couple of rows, please. Thank you. Luckily, you'd answered a couple of those questions already, but...
Question, thank you. Nick Westcott from SOAS.
I'll answer it quickly. Yeah, just hold on a second. Hold the microphone, Nick. Yeah,
on the government, inshallah, we'll have a government, like I said, before the end of the year. I think, you know, I don't think we will have clashes in the south. I don't think anybody wants war in Israel, and anybody wants war in Lebanon. We know from our contacts with everyone in Lebanon, and this is the message that we deliver to the Americans, to everyone, that this is what we don't want any clashes. And so I don't believe there would be a war. And yes, like you said, Lebanon is a good place to invest, and I agree with you. And so anybody who wants to come and invest in Lebanon, we're open to business.
Thank you. Nick.
Nick Westcott, SOAS, formerly with the EU. In Syria, Prime Minister, what do you see as the prospects for peace, and how would Lebanon cope with the return of the Hezbollah militia, unless you want them to stay there?
I think a lot of them have come back. We believe that, you know, Hezbollah had a big force in Syria. I think it was about up to 15,000. Now they diminished, and this is what they're saying themselves. I think you have 2,000 to 3,000 also. This is the intelligence that we have from, you know, the West also. I think what was the other question?
Prospects for peace.
Prospects for peace. I mean, our relationship with Syria. I think Syria's position is like, or the regime's position today is like Saddam Hussein's position after the first Gulf War. You know, where he was moved out from Kuwait, and Iraq became under the United Nations. Today it's under Russian. And you have the Americans, the Iranians, the Turks, and God knows who. And you have the Golan Heights, Israel. So I think his position will be very weak. He has to listen to the Russians. He has to listen. And unless you have a new constitution in Syria, like everybody promises, and right representation of the people in Syria, it will still be ambiguous. There will still be, you know, about 700,000 people were killed. And there is a huge reconciliation that needs to be done in Syria. Without vengeance? And this is the big question mark. And I think I don't have the answer for that.
Gentleman here.
Mr. Prime Minister, you have presented a bright vision for the future of Lebanon, but it seems irrelevant to the reality, which is, I mean, given the fact of the corruption and the infrastructure, such as what happened last 2 weeks, I believe, when Beirut sank down in the drain water. Secondly, do you think the infrastructure is ready to attract the foreign investors to Lebanon? And do you think, is it the right, the Lebanese people has the right to know what has happened to you when you have been enforced to resign in Saudi Arabia?
Last questions.
Well, you think the corruption issue is a real serious. That on all these projects, the countries that will of the bids are extremely transparent. The issue of corruption is extremely to e-government that will also clear a lot of. Beirut is a disgrace. The prosecutor needs to be punished on this, and no matter who he is, we have worked, together. My concern is, I think they have a lot of good ideas and give each other advice and move ahead on these. We've been screaming, and we're screaming. The biggest civil society association to make sure that everything that we do is extremely transparent. And when I was in Saudi Arabia after the Lebanese, because we were, shooting and not continue doing, we cannot tell the Gulf to come to Lebanon of the Gulf. We cannot, I myself, should not make statements about Iran. We need to disassociate ourselves. We need to move away from the regional cliques. The big countries can afford it. We cannot.
Everyone else, this lady had a hand up literally about half an hour ago. Yes, you. When microphone's coming, and I need people to stay in their seats afterwards, please. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Leah Hanna. Is very related to big investments, big companies, big firms. And my question is more, I know a lot of them are watching this or are interested, and so the youth in Lebanon, what is expected from them? What's their role in all of this future growth? Thanks.
I apologize to a lot of young people who had their hands up as well, you've asked the question for them, hopefully. So over to you.
I think, what we're trying to do, we have a lot of startups in Lebanon, and it's all by the youth. On them, on the VAT, the customs. In order in Lebanon to go bankrupt today, a company, this is a law already in Parliament. We're giving them incentives where we owe decision to getting a lot with a lot of associations like Life and Ideas. The ideas, or give us the advice of, they have given us several ideas and we have implemented them. So what I need is this, coming in to do also.
Mr. Prime Minister, let me just say, stayed well beyond the time we'd allotted for this meeting.
I'll make it a 2 minute.
2 minute speech, exactly. But of Lebanon for what you believe it can achieve, you and your other colleagues in government. I think to do all they can do around government. And we heard your remark, make sure that's possible. I think for those who, like me, do not know Lebanon well, we will... Sorry?
Have you been to Lebanon?
I have not been to Lebanon. Said on the words, okay?
And every time I meet somebody...
all the time,
every time wherever they go, they will thrive because they're entrepreneurs. They have, they want to work, they want to achieve. Our problem is how do we make all this energy, focus in the country. And I believe that the only way is, at the time when my father did it, is create stability, security, create the right environment for investment, and leave the Lebanese do the job. Problem is, politicians haven't been letting the Lebanese do their job. We need to move away as a government and do all the legislations that our people want, and then I think Lebanon will thrive.
If you could please stay in your seats, but also give a very big hand to Saad Hariri.